Long ago and far away, there stood a great and ancient city. And in the center of this city stood a magnificent palace. The palace was the home of a wise and learned caliph. The caliph possessed great wealth and power and wanted for nothing. There was only one thing that he longed and thirsted for, and that was knowledge. Each day the caliph would go to the great hall. There would be gathered all the great artists, writers, and philosophers of his kingdom. He enjoyed his talks with these people, for he was constantly searching for great understanding. Distinguished courtiers were also allowed to attend the great hall and listen to these discussions. The caliph's mind was clever and sharp, and he enjoyed talking about art and philosophy, for it was a pleasant distraction from the affairs of state. And for some time now, he had been feeling rather discontented, for though many learned men came, none of them astounded him with their cleverness. Until one day, an old man appeared. He made his way very humbly and silently to the throne. Bowing, he politely offered the caliph a scroll. Then the old man withdrew, leaving the caliph to read what was written. It interested the caliph greatly. A very clever man had written this. He beckoned to a courtier. "Who was that man?" he asked. "It's Moses, a great philosopher and physician." Another courtier, Ahmed, sidled up to the throne. "A word of warning, O Prince. Have nothing to do with Moses. He is a very arrogant fellow who believes himself to be the cleverest man in the land." The caliph listened to Ahmed's advice, but said nothing. Later that afternoon, as the caliph took a stroll in his garden, he read the scroll, and he grew more and more excited. "Oh, here at last is great knowledge," thought the caliph joyfully. "Already I understand better the mysteries of life." So the next morning, the caliph rose early and went to the great hall. He was eager to talk to Moses. Here at last was a truly great thinker to converse with. But as he walked towards his throne, he could see no sign of Moses. "Isn't Moses here?" he asked. "Oh, no, Prince. He has far more important things to do," replied Ahmed nastily. "Hold your jealous tongue," cried the caliph. "Moses speaks words of great wisdom, while you can only speak words of petty envy." Then the caliph called for a trusted servant. "Go and find Moses and bring him here to the palace at once." A servant made his way through the back streets of the city towards the temple, where Moses often preached. At last, the servant came to the street where the temple was. And sure enough, as he approached, who should be leaving the temple but Moses? Suddenly, from out of nowhere, two men appeared. One had a dagger, and he stabbed Moses in the heart. People ran to Moses' side and caught him as he stumbled. To his horror, the servant saw Moses fall to the ground. He hurried to tell the caliph what had happened. Back at the palace, the caliph was waiting. The servant fell to his knees, crying, "Oh, Prince, I went in search of the philosopher and found him. But suddenly he was attacked by two men and stabbed in the heart. I fear he is mortally wounded." The caliph was most upset when he heard this, for Moses' wisdom had moved him greatly. So without ado, he decided to go and visit Moses and tried to speak to him before he died. The caliph and his guards made their way out of the palace darkness and into the streets of the city. At last they came to Moses' house. A servant appeared. He was astonished to see the caliph. "Is your master still alive? I must speak with him." The servant was puzzled and said, "Yes, of course, Prince. He is working in his room." The caliph was taken aback by this, and he entered quickly. To his great amazement, he saw Moses at his desk working. The caliph was delighted. "I thought you'd been stabbed," he cried. But he saw as Moses turned, smiling to him, that there was certainly nothing wrong. The caliph beamed with relief. "Greetings, O noble prince," said Moses. "Today I was lucky. I had been preaching as I usually do. I was just leaving when suddenly 2 young men appeared. They stabbed me and fled. The caliph was still puzzled. The blow would have killed me, but though the dagger pierced the cloth of my coat, it hit the scroll which I was carrying underneath, so it pierced the scroll instead," Moses explained. So it was the scroll of the scriptures which had saved Moses' life. The caliph took the scroll and saw that the words where the dagger had pierced read, "Lord, help me, for thou smitest all mine enemies." The caliph cried, "May God protect you from your enemies, for envy brings you many." And he embraced the philosopher warmly, so glad he had been saved. From then on, Moses and the caliph became the closest of friends. Each day, when Moses had finished preaching or studying, he would make his way through the streets of the ancient city to the palace. He was very honored that the caliph should be so interested in his ideas and philosophy. He greatly enjoyed talking with him, for he was a clever man with interesting views. The caliph, too, looked forward each day to his talks with Moses. Whenever he entered the great hall, he always looked for the philosopher, for he had so many things he wanted to tell him. But sometimes, because of his work, Moses was not there on time. The caliph would wait and talk to the other courtiers, but he always kept an eye on the door. Ahmed was constantly trying to make trouble. "Moses is late today," he would say loudly. The caliph would smile. "Don't worry, Ahmed. I see him coming now." Ahmed would grit his teeth angrily. Moses appeared with a scroll, which he presented to the caliph. All Ahmed could do was gaze jealously, resenting the honored position Moses had gained with the caliph. Moses explained his thoughts and ideas, and although the caliph was no match for him in intellect, he was clever and sharp, and their discussions were full of fire and enthusiasm. The months passed, and Ahmed thought very hard of ways to turn the caliph against Moses. At first, he could think of nothing. Then at last, he had an idea. A cruel and wicked plan. He said nothing, but allowed himself a sly smile. Yes, that is what he would do. Moses wouldn't be the favorite for much longer. A few days later, while the caliph was waiting for Moses, who should come sidling up to his throne but Ahmed. "I see, O Prince, you are waiting for Moses. He's a great man, but very two-faced." "That's enough," cried the caliph. "Since you cannot control your evil tongue, I banish you." As the guards were about to remove him, Ahmed cried out, "Moses has been saying bad things about you. He says he doesn't like talking to you. Take him away, cried the Caliph. He doesn't enjoy talking to you because he says your breath smells. I don't believe you, roared the Caliph, very insulted. But then the Caliph began to have doubts. Why should Ahmed risk his life if it was not true? Was Moses two-faced? He would have to test him and see. So the Caliph let Ahmed go. Ahmed was delighted at the doubts he planted in the Caliph's mind, and he hurried away out of the palace towards Moses' house. There wasn't a second to waste. As he made his way through the streets, he kept chuckling to himself. Even princes were prey to vanity and pride. When Ahmed arrived at Moses' house, the door was open. With an evil grin, Ahmed knocked. Come in, cried Moses, for he was busy at his work. And being a kindly man, he welcomed Ahmed warmly and invited him to be seated. How can I help you, Ahmed? Moses asked pleasantly. I've come to warn you, Moses. The Caliph is complaining your bad breath spoils the pleasures of his talks with you. Then Ahmed rose and left the house, leaving Moses wondering sadly why the Caliph had not told him about his bad breath himself. It was now time for Moses to go to the palace, so he thoughtfully took out a handkerchief as he pondered the Caliph's behavior. Moses went to the palace and into the great hall, but as he approached the throne, the Caliph suddenly took out his handkerchief and pressed it to his lips. What Ahmed told me was true, thought Moses sadly. And he raised his handkerchief to his lips so the Caliph would not be offended by his bad breath. When the Caliph saw this, he was furious. Ahmed was right, he thought. And having no further wish to talk to Moses, he dismissed him from his presence. Moses left greatly puzzled by this sudden coldness. The Caliph turned angrily to a servant. Go to the lime kilns outside the city. Tell the lime burners that a man will come and ask if the Caliph's orders have been carried out. They are to cast this man into the lime kiln. Then the Caliph turned to another servant. Go to Moses' house and tell him that the Caliph requests that he go to the lime kilns immediately and ask the lime burners if my orders have been carried out. So while the first servant hurried away to the lime kilns, the second servant made his way to Moses' house. Moses was in his room working, and when he saw the servant at the door, he welcomed him in. The servant bowed and said, I have a message from the Caliph. He wants you to go immediately to the lime kilns and ask the lime burners if his orders have been carried out. And with that, the servant left. Moses was rather puzzled by the Caliph's strange request. Why does he need to send me? Couldn't one of his servants go? But since it was an order, he obediently put away his work and set out for the lime kilns. Meanwhile, in the garden of the palace, the Caliph and Ahmed were talking. The Caliph thanked Ahmed for his great loyalty to him. He told him how he had planned for Moses to meet his death at the lime kilns. Ahmed was delighted that his enemy would be no longer. Now he could be the Caliph's favoured friend. His evil plan was working after all, and he listened happily to the Caliph's compliments. Moses walked out of the city and along the road that led to the lime kilns. His thoughts were filled with the beauty and wonder of the universe. He felt very peaceful and content. He was just passing a broken-down old house when suddenly his daydreaming was interrupted by a woman. "Please stop, sir," she cried. "My daughter is very sick. Please come and look at her." "Good woman," said Moses. "I am on a mission for the Caliph. I will visit her on my return." "Oh, please come now," begged the woman, and she pleaded so hard that Moses finally agreed. Inside the house, Moses found the young girl lying on a mat. As he and the woman sat down beside her, he saw that the girl looked very pale. Moses could see that the girl was ill and needed rest, but he saw that something else was troubling her, and when he moved the lamp in front of her, she put up her hand to hide the light. As he motioned to the woman to put the lamp out, she cried, "Is it lawful to put the lamp out on the Sabbath?" "Yes, allow God's light to shine on her while she sleeps," said Moses. "When she wakes in the morning, she will feel better." Then Moses opened the shutters so that the afternoon light might shine in on the child. Already she began to look more peaceful, and it wasn't long before she'd fallen into a deep sleep. The woman was very grateful, but Moses was now impatient to be on his way, for it was getting late, and he had been told by the Caliph to go straight to the lime kilns. He had no wish to anger the Caliph further, since he was already acting strangely towards him. It was a long, hot walk to the lime kilns across the desert. And at last he arrived. As Moses came towards the kiln, he saw smoke billowing out of the chimney and door. They must be very busy, thought Moses. And as he walked into the furnace room, he could feel the heat. The fire was being stoked by two of the lime burners, while the third looked on. Moses entered and asked, "Have the Caliph's orders been carried out?" "Yes," laughed the chief lime burner. "The works have been done all right." And as he pointed to the furnace, the other lime burners laughed coarsely. Moses was very puzzled by this answer, and the lime burners' laughter. What did they mean? But since he had done as the Caliph asked, he left the kiln. Moses made his way back across the hot, dry land towards the city. He would visit the Caliph in the morning and tell him that he had obeyed his orders, though the reason for it still mystified him. The next day, the Caliph made his way to the great hall as usual and was sitting there quite happily when who should appear in the doorway but Moses. The Caliph went very pale, and his eyes widened with shock. "What are you doing here?" cried the Caliph. "Didn't I tell you to go to the lime kilns?" he spluttered. "Yes, O Prince," said Moses, "and this I did. The lime burners told me that the work had been carried out as you requested." When the Caliph heard these words, he rose in horror, crying out, "Then an innocent man has been burnt!" Moses was very shocked and said, "But the Caliph would never agree to such a crime." But the Caliph could not be consoled. "But I did. Something must have gone wrong, for it was you I wanted to burn in the lime kiln." "Oh, Prince," said Moses sadly, "what have I done to deserve such a terrible fate?" The Caliph was full of remorse. "It was Ahmed," he explained. "He said that you were telling everyone in court that my breath smelt. When you took out your handkerchief, I believed him. He did the same thing to me, said Moses. We both allowed our vanity to blind our judgment. Just then, a servant entered, followed by the chief lime burner. He came up to the caliph and, bowing, said, "We obeyed you, caliph. We burnt the first man who came to the kilns and asked if your orders had been carried out." Then the lime burner held out his hand and showed them a ring, which was all that remained. "But that belongs to Ahmed," cried the caliph. Then they realized that Ahmed must have been so impatient to know if Moses had perished that he'd hurried out to the lime kilns and asked if the caliph's order had been carried out, while Moses, meanwhile, had stopped to heal the girl. So it was Ahmed who had met his death instead. Moses offered up a prayer to the Lord for once more saving him from his enemies. The caliph was so delighted and relieved that he had not lost his dear friend after all, and felt so full of remorse for believing Ahmed's lies, that never again did either of them